Hello, my name is Jeffrey Medor, and I'm a victim of organized stalking. And for this crime, I've officially accused General Dynamics Electric Boat and Soundless. Now, I've been away from YouTube and creating videos since the last quarter of 2015. But it hasn't been for lack of a story to tell. Some of my time since then has been punctuated by violence, outrageous response by law enforcement. And I feel like it's time for exposure. It's time to bring that out. And I need to tell my story here about some of the events that have happened in the last year and a half. So this video I've entitled Enemies of the State 1. Weaponizing a Human. Weaponizing a Human. In past videos I've talked about this electronics that's being used on myself and my loved ones and others in my path. It's manufactured by a company called Tetra Systems, and it's has a significant range. My understanding is they start losing me about 1.25 miles out on the highway when I'm being followed. It's capable of disrupting the central nervous system in many ways. It can produce pain and extreme pain anywhere in the body, tremor, anxiety, the feeling of strong depression. It produces subliminal messages that feel like my own thoughts, but I know that they're not. After a long time of being followed and attacked with this type of equipment, I've learned to discriminate. And someone recently asked me, how do you discriminate if it feels like your own thoughts? And I said, well, I don't act on anything that's outside of my value system. And I think that's important. Every thought, I need to take it in and examine it before I act on it. And that's how it's been for a number of years. So this equipment is capable of controlling a person, especially if a person is not aware of what it can do to them. Think about it. You're in a conversation. Someone says something to you that maybe you don't quite care for, but normally you would let it go. Suddenly, anger, depression, anxiety, irritability well up within you, and you respond. And you respond, you express that anger. And what do you respond about? You respond about whatever was said to you that maybe ruffled you a little bit, but you would have let it go. But suddenly, you've created a problem. Okay, you've responded in a way you wouldn't have responded normally. That type of control. And I've seen that different people can be controlled to different degrees. Some greater than others. If they don't suspect it at all, that's when it's the most dangerous. But there are others that can be taken over and controlled, and when the control stops, they don't seem to realize what they did. It all depends, it seems, on the person, and maybe the operator. All my experience has been on this end of it. So it's a very powerful and dangerous tool. It takes all privacy away from a person. If you point this at a person, you can listen to what they say. You can listen to what they hear. You can see visually what they're looking at. And you can record their subconscious thoughts. So it's very, very invasive. I discussed in the past a woman who I had come to stay with me. I met her at Connecticut Valley Hospital. I was held there for 110 days for no reason whatsoever. And I've discussed that in past videos. But I met a woman there. I had met her briefly in the past, and I recognized her. And she was there for the same reason as I was. I say reason because, well, I was there because they said I was not competent to stand trial for arrests that have never should have taken place, arrests where there was no evidence really to prosecute. Suddenly, I'm being confined. I ended up there for 110 days, and I left without a psychiatric diagnosis. While I was there, I ran into a woman by the name of Stephanie, and I spoke of her a little bit in prior videos. Her complete name is Stephanie Jaworowitz. And in talking to her, and in watching her, and hearing her story, I realized she was also a victim, just like me. So I spent maybe 100 days there, observing, talking to her, watching. And during that time, she said, "Can I come and stay at your house when I get out of here?" And at first I balked at it. She asked me again, and I said, "Yeah, I will help you." While she was up there, I was being followed by FBI, using this equipment. They had it in the hospital. And they started affecting Stephanie. And they knew she was going to come to my home. So when we got out of there, I hired a lawyer. I went to Milford, where Stephanie's case was. And I'll talk more about that later. But ultimately, Stephanie's charges were dropped. And she came to stay with me. And now at my home, I was now being followed by FBI. And behind them, I believe there were DOD people. And FBI were out front running interference, making sure no one in law enforcement would stop what they were doing. And their behavior was outrageous and lawless. Well, I got to see Stephanie Jaworowitz at my home. When she got there, she saw what the medication was doing to her body, and she stopped it cold. She didn't want to be gaining a lot of weight. She wanted to be active. She wanted to take care of herself. And so she got off the medication. And over time, I saw this lovely woman emerge. She was kind. She seemed honest. She was pleasant to be around. She was a pleasure to have in my home. I could leave with her here, come back, knowing that everything would be in order. I found that I could trust her. She was doing very well. And I could even see that she herself was sort of amazed at how good life was becoming. And this went on for a little while. I got to watch her day in and day out getting better and better and better. And I felt very, very good about it. I was helping another human being. And she looked so happy. It was a great experience. But suddenly, those that were stalking me started ramping up their attack on Stephanie. I watched them take this happy, kind, and decent human being and turn her into a monster with a flick of a switch. Suddenly, this person who knew how to behave in public would turn into someone that no one wanted to be around. Not anyone. And I watched that kind of switch on and off. I watched them experimenting with their equipment, because now it's FBI out front. They're learning the ropes. They're enjoying it. it was like a party atmosphere on the other end. Partying around tearing another human being down, upsetting me over it, and hurting me all they can. Their real goal was supposed to be to make me go away as a witness, to kill me, to take my life. That was their real goal, and they were enjoying every minute of it. And suddenly Stephanie was here, and they wanted to use her to make it hard on me. And I believe they were planning on eliminating her also, because now she was a witness, and others knew that. The staff from Connecticut Valley Hospital knew that the FBI took her on, and I brought her home. So by October, later in the month, 2015, it was getting bad for Stephanie. I was worried about what they were doing to her. I didn't want her to commit suicide. That's how they normally kill with this equipment. They drive a person into suicide. I did not want that to happen. I got on the phone. I said, I have to reach out and try to get this stopped. Now, people that are targeted, when we talk to those other people that are targeted that know the ropes, we talk to leaders in the targeted community, they'll tell us, never talk to the police about this. Never talk to a healthcare professional, because they'll drive you into psychiatric hospitals. I thought to myself, I want to save this woman's life, and if they were here attacking her physically, I would respond. I'm not afraid of them. Why am I afraid to go to the police? And so I did. The East Line police basically would ignore me. I would go down there and try to speak with them, and the woman out front would tell me, there's no one here to talk to you. I'd say, well, I will wait. Well, there might not be anyone here all day. Leave your name, we'll call you. And they knew who I was. They recognized my face. And they just played that game. It was the East Line police who told me the FBI was involved, and I was supposed to believe they were involved because of the crime that was committed against me. But yet the East Line police wouldn't talk to me. Unable to get help there, I contacted the state police. I wanted to come up and put in a police report. A report about things that have happened, things that are verifiable surrounding this situation with stalking. I wanted to go up there and put that report in, get some people investigating, let them find out more, and then I could feed them more information. And we could get this stopped. The state police at Montville, Troop E, told me, you can't come up here and put in a report. I said, I'm a resident of the state of Connecticut. I can't come up there and put in a report with the state police. They said, no. You have to go to East Line. If you come up here, we will turn you around and send you to East Line. I went over their heads. I believe I talked to Warren Hyatt's office, lieutenant, commander. I talked to Doris Rero, the commissioner of public protection in Middletown. After talking with these people, and I had calls into the first selectman in East Line, who is officially the chief of police, and his secretary assured me, he has your messages, Mr. Medora. After all of that, I got a call from the resident state trooper, East Line. He said, come on down, we'll do the report for you. I was nervous. I said, I have to do it. I went down, and I sat down with Sergeant Mason. He's the only one I met with. And I started giving him information, and he started writing it all down, saying, we're gonna investigate this. Sergeant Blanchett, the resident state trooper, came in. without even talking to me. He said, "You're not thinking quite right. That's what we believe. And we're taking you to a psychiatric hospital." He says, "The FBI is not involved. People are just giving you lip service." Now, Sergeant Masick, who was taking my report, he's the one who told me they were involved. And I've talked to them on the phone. They assured me they're involved. I told Sergeant Blanchett, the resident state trooper, "Don't do this. You can't. You need probable cause that I'm a danger to myself or others to take me to the hospital. I have not given you that." I turned to Sergeant Masick and I said, "What have I done to show you that I'm a danger?" He just held his hands up in the air, like that. He was the only one I met with. Sergeant Blanchett said, "You're upsetting people all the way up the line," meaning I'm going over their heads and upsetting those people. He says, "This is happening. You're going to the hospital, and there's no way around it." I told him a few times, "Don't do this. The only place I'm going from here is home. You can't take me into custody. I haven't committed a crime. I haven't shown you a danger." He said, "There's no way around it." He wanted me to get in the car with Sergeant Masick and have him drive me to the hospital, and I balked at that. So they called an ambulance, and they walked me out, and I got in. And I was held for 15 days at Lawrence and Memorial's Pond House. While I was there, I was awfully nervous, because the reason I went to the authorities is because I was afraid for this person in my house, Stephanie Jaworowitz. Now she's alone, and they're still doing to her what they did before I went to the police. Well, there's nothing I could do about it. After 15 days, I got out. And this was supposed to teach me a lesson. I was supposed to be quiet from there on. Well, I was released in November 2015. And when I got out, I wrote registered letters about this situation. I complained to General Dynamics President Jeffrey Geiger. I've called him a number of times on the phone. I complained to Phoebe Novakovic, General Dynamics CEO, registered letter. I complained to James Comey, then Director of the FBI, registered letter. I complained to Loretta Lynch, then Attorney General, registered letter. I complained to Doris Shariro, who is the commissioner over the state police, a registered letter. I called Doris Shariro's office and told her office what was going on, and that I need this to stop. And they said, "What would you like her to do for you?" I said, "I'd like her to force the police to stop this." She said, "Okay, I'll give her the message." Nothing. I sent emails to Doris Shariro requesting help to stop this. Nothing. The lawlessness continued, and the attack on Stephanie Jaworowitz continued and worsened. I was afraid for her life. I remember at that time Stephanie was forced into seclusion. It was the type of thing, and I even heard the stalkers, because I can hear them. This technology, I could converse with them. It's called voice-to-skull technology. It's V2K, they call it. I can converse with those that are stalking me, and I can hear if they're near that equipment when they talk. That they were being very firm with her. They were punishing her. And what I started to realize, they were punishing her for seeing me in the house. So if I saw her. So if I was in the house, she basically ran away and would go back to her room. And so she was secluded. I didn't see her anymore. And I feared for her. I feared for her life. In January 2016, I was in court. And the reason I was in court was because of arrests that came about in 2012. And I just kept moving toward trial. I wanted a trial. I wanted to be proven innocent. I didn't want to take a deal. And so my case never went anywhere. I've been to court, I believe, close to 50 times. So in January 2016, I went to court, and an East Line police officer came in and testified against me. He testified as to why I shouldn't be allowed to possess a firearm. And one reason was because I believed this was happening to me. Therefore, I must be crazy. The second reason was because I had Stephanie living with me. And she had already been a problem, they said. So when it was my turn to talk, to ask questions, I said that the officer said that police had been here a couple of times because of Stephanie. I said, no, only once. I said, do you know what the issue was? And he responded, I believe she said that you took a sheet from her bed. Okay. That's not, even if it were true, and it wasn't, that's not an issue of domestic violence. That's no reason to say that a man shouldn't possess a firearm in his home because a woman called the police to say I took a sheet off her bed. That doesn't make sense. I saw it as a prediction that she was going to become violent. I also heard that police were involved in this stalking operation. That prediction of violence soon turned into reality. Some things happened. Some incidents came about where Stephanie was violent. She kicked in the door to my bedroom, splintered the lock, where the lock was, split the door, kicked it in. She took knives and stabbed them through fruit, and left it on the kitchen table. Just some pretty strange things. I knew that the situation had to end because it was getting too violent. It's getting too much. For her safety and mine, this is not good. And I told her, you're going to have to find another place. And I thought if she was away from me, I'm really the objective here. I had hoped that they wouldn't bother her if I got her away from here. Okay, one morning in February 2016, suddenly I'm in my basement and water's dripping out of the ceiling. I go up to the second floor and it's coming out of the living room ceiling just below her room. I went down and shut the water off. Went up and knocked on her door. I said, I have to come in, there's a flood. I have to come in. I went in and she had gone into the bathroom and hid. I didn't try to go in the bathroom. But I talked to her through the door because I knew she was doing it. On the way out of the room, I picked up a butcher knife. It was the sharpest knife I have in the house. It was from the kitchen. And she normally did not take knives out of the kitchen. I brought it back downstairs. I went to the basement. And I isolated the leak. And got the water back for the rest of the house. I called the police in East Lyme, and I said, I have someone here in my home that's presenting a danger, and I need you to come out, evaluate her, possibly take her to the hospital for evaluation. Now that's not what I wanted for Stephanie. But a stay in the hospital is a whole lot better than the violence here. And I thought, well, she'll be away from me at least. Maybe she won't get hurt. And it was cold out. And she'd be warm and she'd be fed. And from there I could figure out what to do. I waited a half hour. No police. I called them back. And they said, we can't justify coming to your home for that. We can't justify evaluating Stephanie. I said, you have to come to my home. You have to. You need to get out here. And so they did. Before they had gotten there, I was down in the basement. And Stephanie came down. I hadn't seen her in months. And suddenly she's in my face and she wants the water back on. And I told her, no, I can't. There's a leak. It's flooding. I can't turn it back on. She walks over to where valves are and I walked over with her. And suddenly, a knife came out right to my throat. And I jumped back. Because suddenly, this is a very serious situation. I had no idea she would ever assault me. I was worried for her safety. Suddenly, a knife to my throat. I jumped back. And we kind of sparred around in a circle. Until she had passage to get out. When the knife first came out, my back was to her passage. But I don't think she was worried about getting by me. Well, now she had clear passage to leave. I stepped back from the fight. She turned and she picked up a heavy piece of copper wire from the bench. And armed with that and the knife, she re-engaged me. And I took on a fighting stance. I mean, she's a woman about my height, in good shape, but a woman. And I don't think she had fighting skills. But the look in her eye and the way she behaved was as if she knew that she could kill me. And she came at me with that knife. And with me in a fighting stance to let her know. And I said, I will cold cock you. I will cold cock you. Don't. It was all bluff. I would have never hit her. So she came at me with the knife, and I turned to give a kick straight out. And if I had to make contact, I was going to just contact her thigh and shove her back, just to get away from me. But she saw the body language. I saw her look up and down at my body, and she saw that she couldn't get through. And she just turned, dropped the wire on the floor, and armed with the knife, walked on out, with her back to me, right up the stairs. Now, if this were an intruder and a real confrontation, that person would have never turned their back to me. That was a perfect opportunity for me to take them down. It was all mechanical. She didn't have fighting skills. She's not a violent person. But whatever was driving her drove her to believing that she could take my life. And she tried. As the police arrived, I had just come up from downstairs. She had gone up to her room, went in, locked the door. I came out, and I was a little excited. And I told the police, I said, she just threatened me with a knife. She's armed with a knife. And they said, Jeff, calm down. We'll go in and we'll talk to her. I had a pair of pliers in my back pocket. I handed them to the officer. I had picked them up because I wanted to give it to them when they came so that they could pop the lock on her room door. There's a pair of needle nose pliers. I said, you're going to need these. These police, now think about it. If you were police and you were called to a home and the man who called you said he was in danger, and as you arrive, he's coming out the door saying, we were just in a confrontation. She assaulted me with a knife. If you were police, would you just walk in the door? I think you'd walk in with weapons ready. You'd walk in carefully. I think police would want to get away from the windows and talk to me and find out, could there be a firearm? Where is she? What does she have? How was she armed? What did she do? They'd want to know about what happened before they went in. These police didn't. We'll go in and we talk to her. And they went up to her room to talk to her. And they did. When they came out, they gave me my pliers back and put them in my back pocket. They said, the drain trap was off. And we put it back. We fixed it. The problem solved. I said, she's becoming violent. And I told her she has to leave, and I'm going to change the lock on the door. They said, if you do that, we will arrest you for criminal lockout. This is where she lives. You can evict her. You have to go to court for that, and it's going to take 90 days. I said, she has a knife. And an officer pointed toward the pliers in my back pocket. And he said, she's got a knife, and you've got those. And they left. They came downstairs. They went to the kitchen. I said, what's it going to take for you to do something? They looked disturbed. They didn't want to talk. They left. And I was left with an armed assailant still in my home. The following day, I went to court and applied for a restraining order. And thankfully, the judge heard my case. He said, you've met your burden of proof. He gave me a restraining order. And marshals served it, state marshals, to Stephanie. They slid it under her door and told her she had to leave. She would not open the door. And ultimately, she left. Ultimately, she left. And that night I stayed at my mom's house over in Waterford. I was tired. I was sick of the whole situation. Wanted to see my mom. I stayed at her house on the couch. And as I laid on the couch, those that were stalking me were really hurting me. They were attacking my heart and attacking it in a powerful way. I was running equipment in my vehicle, radio equipment, that was disturbing their equipment, so they could only get so close to me. And they were attacking me in a powerful way, kept waking me up with chest pain and all kinds of things. I do believe they wanted to drive me back home. That was their intent. And I kept hearing them saying they were trying to get in and get close to me and avoid my radio equipment so they could get closer. So it was something different. They were really coming on strong. And I do believe they wanted to drive me home. When I went home the next morning, the window on the door was smashed to the back door of my breezeway. Glass all over the floor. I went into the house, and I carefully went through the house. I got to Stephanie's room. There was a tea candle burning, sitting on top of a bookcase that had all the notes she had written about. She was one to journal a lot. All those notes all were in that bookcase with a tea candle sitting on top, burning down. And since it's a short burning candle, I could tell she had just left. So she was there all night. I had a surveillance video camera running, and I could see she got there the evening before. She stayed all night, and she left in the morning. And she smashed the window to get in. I put it all together. I was at my mom's house. And those stalking me were trying to drive me home. and they had Stephanie break in. They wanted her to get another shot at me. And since I wouldn't go home, she left that next morning. Well, when I got home and I saw the window broken and saw what had happened, I called the state police at Montville. Since the East Line police wouldn't help me with an armed assailant, why call them again? For a burglary, a break-in, maybe an arson attempt. Why call them? I called the state police. Dispatch said they'd send someone right down. They didn't. East Line police, the same two officers, responded. It was clear there was a crime committed, glass all over the floor, etc. They took pictures, did a write-up. They said they'd pick her up, and they left. I called my mom, told her what happened. She called the East Line police later that day, wanting to find out what's going on. She's concerned her son's in danger. They said they caught up with Stephanie in the library, and they told her, just don't go there anymore. Don't go back to his house. And they left it. They left her alone. Now this is after putting a knife to my throat. This is after smashing the window, breaking in, violating a restraining order. Just don't go to his house. That evening, I looked out the window and there were police cars in my driveway, across the front of my home, in the road. And Stephanie was there, and there was an officer at the door. He said, we caught her in the driveway. We would like to get her cell phone, charger, a few things, and we'd like to maybe have her family pick up all her things so she won't have a need to come here anymore. Okay. I mean, all I really wanted was her away from the house. A little while later, he told me she's being mouthy and uncooperative, and we're going to have to arrest her. Otherwise, they can't take her away. They can't remove her, so they had to arrest her. They took her into custody. I have to say, I mean, I don't know what the East Line police were told, but they certainly tried to be kind to Stephanie and trying to work it out without an arrest. So it's my understanding they understand what happened, that it was mind control. But still, the laws are in place for a purpose. The procedures are in place for a purpose. I really do believe that those in charge of those police wanted Stephanie on the loose for her to take another shot at me. That's the way I see it. So by no means those officers that were there that night, by no means do I want to bash them. I appreciated their kindness, their patience, and trying to get the situation under control. That's the most I can say. Well, that night she was arrested. She was released on a non-surety bond, back out on the street. And I believe she went to a shelter. A number of days later, I was contacted by the East Line police, and they said, we arrested her again, and she's in jail. She's in Corrigan. No, not Corrigan. I believe she was in JB Gate, not JB Gates. I can't think of the name of the prison. She was in prison. They arrested her for breaking into my home and violating the restraining order. What really confuses me is that was the first offense. The first arrest was for the second offense. They had all the evidence of the first offense there on hand. They did not arrest her for those things. But after she was away from my home, if the intent was to just separate us, well, she was away. She wasn't around here. She wasn't a problem. I wasn't complaining. But then they arrested her, and she was placed in custody. This whole thing was really hard for me to go through. Bear in mind, I was trying desperately to save Stephanie's life. I knew what was being done to her was not her fault. I did not want her arrested. I did not want her in jail. I wanted her free. I wanted her to become the beautiful person that she really is and salvage what's left of her life. Put it back together, and I think she can. I think she's very capable. I think the fact that she survived these years of abuse, and I believe it's about 20 years from all I could put together of abuse. Now she was in jail. While this whole thing transpired, I have a voice recorder. And I would take my voice recorder and go off and make notes, audio notes, of everything that I saw, everything that I heard, everything. And it was really for my own purposes, so when this is over I could go back, maybe feed some of it to authorities. I could go back and really have it documented what I went through. But suddenly, Stephanie was in jail. I did not want her prosecuted. So I took my audio notes, I dumped them onto a CD. I was going to put that CD in a safe deposit box. But instead, I took and sent it with a registered letter to the prosecutor handling her case at GA10 in New London, Rafael Bustamante. I sent it to him with a letter stating what I really wanted, that I was looking to save Stephanie's life, and it's a very sad situation, very disturbing situation that she's now in jail. So she was in custody for 3 months. During that time, victim advocacy called me, and when I returned the call, they said, what do you want to see happen to Stephanie? Do you want her in jail? Do you want her on probation, parole, in a program? What would you like to see happen to Stephanie? And I replied, I would like her released, charges dropped, and her record cleared of wrongdoing. This was not Stephanie's fault. And I went on to explain, I'm engaged in a situation where I'm being assaulted by General Dynamics and Sonalist. FBI are involved. Police are involved. Stephanie stayed at my home and I was trying to help her. But she was affected very badly by their electronics, and that's why she did what she did. I don't want her prosecuted. The woman responded, and she said, so this was all effects from without that caused her behavior. I said, exactly. She says, I'm really glad you called. And I thank you. So she happily accepted that. And then Stephanie was released. March 21st. Now Stephanie wasn't really released till May, so Stephanie was still in custody in March. March 21st, I wrote a letter to the governor, Governor Malloy. And I described everything that happened, what was happening here, and what happened with Stephanie. An officer predicted in court, and when it happened, those police would not help me. Those police left me exposed to a threat. Those police left with the assailant still in my home, and armed. Something is very wrong. And at the same time, I wanted to let the governor know that I'm in favor of Stephanie being released. That is not her fault. I didn't know where to go, other than all the way to the top. I went to the top of the state police, and they ignored me. Well, first, as I understand it, they abused me. They put me in a psych hospital. All my concerns that I had contacted everyone over and got them shaken up over turned out to be valid concerns, and I was assaulted. People could have been hurt. It could have been tragic. It could have been tragic. What if those police who went in the house got attacked by Stephanie. It could have been tragic. They went in there believing that they weren't in any danger. Okay, so I summarized this to the governor, looking for help. I heard nothing. Ultimately, the state police at Troopy in Montville called me. They said, we'd like you to come up so we could discuss this complaint you've made. I went up there. They had a copy of the letter I had sent to the governor. I sat down with them. I was hoping that it was time for this to come out in the open. How could they deny it? Real things happen. Let me just add that the police that came to my door that evening, that Stephanie was arrested the first time, I said to the officer, she put a knife to my throat. And he said, oh, I know. I read the whole write-up. So somewhere there's a write-up. The police did not do a write-up in my presence. But somewhere there is a write-up, and the other police know. So I sat down with police, state police, Troop E, Montville. Detective Morales was the one in charge. He talked to me. I told him the FBI was involved. He left the room briefly. He came back. He said, I just checked. The FBI's not involved. Well, that's simply untrue. I've talked to them. He said, I want to ask you a question. Is it possible that Stephanie did these things and became violent because she went off her medication? Well, I'm a man of science. If you say to me, Jeff, is it possible? And I can't prove it's impossible, then I say, yes, there's possibility. And I said, well, it's possible. But I didn't think so. I saw her off of her medication. I saw the electronics, what was done to her. I heard in the background. So I didn't think it was very probable. But since I agreed to possible, he said, oh, okay, good. He said, then the way I'm going to conclude this investigation is she just needs medication and she'll be fine. Now that's not right. If someone commits a crime and they're not thinking right, and ultimately, well, that gets sorted out in court. They may be found not guilty by reason of insanity or something like that. But it's not for the police to drop charges because she stopped taking her medication. Well, they turned to me. Detective Morales said, what about you? Is it possible you need medication? We talked for a minute, and he said, that's the way I'm concluding this investigation. She needs medication, and you need medication. And then this whole thing's not a problem. I mean, that is very irresponsible. It's actually outrageous. Then he went on poking around to find probable cause. And I could tell he was really hunting. Because he was disturbed that I went over their heads. I went to the governor. He told me, don't do that anymore. Contact me. Don't contact headquarters, the governor. Heavens, contact me. And then he was looking for probable cause to punish me. He brought in mobile outreach. And I was careful I wouldn't give it to them. So ultimately he said, well, we're not going to be committing you today. But, basically don't contact the governor. Don't. If you have any questions, contact me. Sometime after that, I contacted headquarters again in Middletown. I went over their heads, looking to get this situation stopped. I got a call from Detective Morales. He told me, I told you not to do that. Contact me. Got the message. So I called back and I told him, you are responsible for my protection. I pay taxes in this state. You're the state police. You're responsible for my protection, and I'm not being protected. And he responded by saying, I'm not going to talk to you anymore until I'm in the presence of my sergeant. So obviously what I said was meaningful. He didn't get back to me right away. I called and I left some messages. I wanted to warn him, really, and inform him about this situation going on around me that has involved police, FBI, others in town, soundless people. And it sounds like a big party. They get together and they have group sex, a bunch of men. And none of them sound like homosexuals. But they get together and they have this sort of sodomy feast, and it sounds like a big party. They use the electronics to cause themselves to be sexually stimulated, hypersexual. And they have these parties. And a whole lot of other things go on. And they seem to enjoy hurting me. It's like I could refer to it as satanic ritual abuse. It's very ritualistic, it's very satanic, and boy is it abusive. And I believe people that get involved in that party find themselves in a position where they can't talk about any of this because of what they did. And it's all been recorded, it's been witnessed, and I believe that party has been to accomplish just that. These people, the FBI agents, have gone around and partied with people in positions to stop this, and now they can't. I wanted to inform Detective Morales of those things so he'd look into it, maybe get on my team and want to stop it. He called me back. Well, he didn't call me back right away. I called his lieutenant, finally. And then he called me back and he was angry. He said, "You just called my lieutenant." I said, "Yes, detective, I did. I called you 3 times. You didn't return my call. You said you're the one I'm supposed to talk to." He said, "We are very close to committing you. We're not there yet, but we're real close. Don't bother us. Don't go over our heads to headquarters. Don't bother us or we will commit you." I said, "You can't. You don't have probable cause." And I said that a few times and he got angry and he said, "I understand probable cause." I said, "You don't have evidence that I'm a danger to myself or others. Without that, you cannot do anything to me." He said, "We'll go to court and get it done." We'll go to court and get it done. So, anyways, I told him that they were negligent, I believe, and ultimately we hung up. And I started thinking, all it takes is probable cause to commit someone for 15 days for observation. But to commit someone longer, it takes clear and convincing evidence, and you have to go to court. So I'm assuming that's what they were looking for. That's what they were after. Clear and convincing evidence. Well, they certainly didn't have that. I wasn't too worried. Ultimately, I sent a letter to their commander, Colonel Fox, and that was in December of 2016, asking for his help in this situation. And I've heard nothing from him. But within a couple of days of sending that letter, suddenly through probations and all, because I see a probation officer, I finally took a deal. I got sick of going to court and I took a deal. 2 years, it all goes off my record. The whole thing goes away. And then I'll take it from there. Because I think there's been a lot of wrongs committed against me. But I wanted to get off the merry-go-round of going to court. So I see a probation officer once a month. And through probations, court support services, Suddenly they wanted me in front of a doctor. And this was a counselor that was assigned to me from Catholic Charities. Suddenly, she believed everything I told her. I gave her evidence. Suddenly, out of nowhere, she disbelieved me, wanted to be in front of a doctor. And so I agreed, I'll sit down and talk to the doctor. And I did. I told the doctor what was going on, but nothing that took faith to believe. I didn't talk about the electronics. I talked about what police had done to me. Some of that. And by the end of the session, he wanted to see me a number of more times, and he said that he was seeing paranoia. I said to the doctor, what if these things I've told you are true? What then? And he said nothing. It appeared as if he wasn't going to even verify them. When it was over, I was going to get a psychiatric diagnosis. I went back to the therapist who had arranged it, and I told her, I'm not going to talk to the doctor anymore. He's not scientific. He's jumped to conclusions. He's calling me paranoid. And I gave him verifiable things. And so I refused. And I could go on and on what happened, but ultimately I didn't have to. And no one has said I have to. I think that was a way of possibly getting me committed and going through court to get it done. Seeing as on their own they couldn't get it done through court, you need clear and convincing evidence. But I'm already involved in court, so I believe they tried to tamper with that to see if they could do something to me. I sensed it coming and I cut it off. The bottom line is I don't have to talk to anyone that I don't want to talk to. October 31st, 2016, I sent a letter to the Inspector General, U.S. Department of Justice, to their office, complaining about what the FBI had done here and how abusive they were. How I had spent a month camping in the White Mountains with the FBI on my tail in New Hampshire. The last week of it, I was in the snow all week with the FBI on my tail. How they had followed me on a train, which means they boarded the train, which means they exposed the people on that train to dangerous levels of microwave radiation from that equipment. And they followed me to Boston. I complained to the Inspector General, Department of Justice. Within 14 days, I got a letter back. This is the first person that's responded of all the letters I've written. And they said that my complaint had been handed over to the Inspection Division of the FBI in Washington, D.C. And I was to communicate with them from then on. I sent a letter to the Assistant Director, Nancy McNamara, in Washington. I heard nothing. I sent a letter to Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General himself. Copies of everything. I heard nothing. So it's roughly 8 months later. And I'm still getting abused. Daily. Daily abuse here. So, I think what I've experienced here is getting to see the grooming of a human being to make them dangerous and assaultive, to put them out of their normal mind and put them in a situation where they will assault and kill on command. I watched the grooming process as it took place, and I listened to it. And I heard them say at one point they changed what they were doing with her. At first I saw the abuse, and then I saw them change gears. And there they started working on gaining her cooperation. I believe they took her to the place where they knew what would bring about suicide. And then they stopped. And they made note of that. And then they started working toward homicide. I know Stephanie had left strange messages from my wife on her phone. Stephanie didn't have any issues with my wife. My wife knew there was not a relationship between us. My ex-wife, I should say. We were forced to divorce because of this. But Stephanie had left strange messages. In Stephanie's room after she left, I found a note. It was dated February 1st, 2016. And it said, Lita is dead. Lita is my wife. Lita is dead. And so the picture that I see is Stephanie was supposed to kill me. My mom normally calls me every day. She would have not been able to get a hold of me. She would have called Lita, my ex-wife. She would come to find out what happened, and Stephanie would kill her also. And then Stephanie was going to be forced into suicide after seeing what she'd done. Because Stephanie was such a sensitive and kind person. I mean, Stephanie's so sensitive and kind, I watched her picking up worms off the walkway so no one would step on them. Because she felt for them. That's the kind of person she is. All they would have had to do is turn back and show what they had done, what she had done. She would snap back to reality. They could add depression and all kinds of things, and she would have suicided because they knew what it was going to take. So she was supposed to murder me, my wife, and then they were going to murder her by suicide. I believe that was the plan. I have pictures of that note. These type of things, I think, this situation, I think, is worth me recording about it. I got to see it. I wonder, myself, as I look back in time, when electronics started becoming more portable, back when we got PCs on our desk, an outrageous and tragic event occurred at Columbine, a school, where people went in, killed children and faculty, gunned them down, and ultimately took their life. And that's happened other places, right here in Newtown, Connecticut. And at the end, the people are destroyed. They're made homicidal, and before it's over, they commit suicide. They're not free to unwind. No one wants them unwinding. And I do wonder if those events aren't being caused by this type of electronics. And if by this type of electronics, quite possibly, it's the Department of Defense causing it. That's my suspicion. So my goal in all of this situation with Stephanie was to save her life. Ultimately, she's out there. This past March, I saw in the news that her parents said she was missing, that she's not taking medication and she's in danger, that she's normally in a shelter in the Milford area. And then a few days later, they found her. Police said they found her. And she was okay. And I realized something. That's where she was living prior to Connecticut Valley Hospital, and she was supposed to return there. Up at Connecticut Valley Hospital, it was people from Sikorsky that were stalking her. The FBI displaced them, and they took her over. And I heard they were supposed to give her back to Sikorsky. And ultimately, it appears that's where she is, back in Milford, back being stalked and abused by Sikorsky, DOD. And yes, her life is in danger. I've sent her a couple of emails, and she responds like a crazy, nasty woman. That's not Stephanie Jaworowitz. The world needs to know that Stephanie Jaworowitz is a kind and beautiful, gentle, compassionate, lovely person. And it is a shame that the Department of Defense has done to her what they have. And it's my prayer that this can be stopped. They absolutely hate me making this video. I've gotten abused horribly here. I am abused daily, to the extreme. But I am committed to stand up to them. They have done all that they can do to me, I believe. It's time for it to stop. Okay, I'll be doing more. I have more to talk about. A lot has happened. I have much more to talk about, and I think it'll be very interesting. For now, I thank you for listening. God bless you.